concept. Today's video is going to be a fermenting video. I'm going to show you my new build for my fermenting bin that I have. I've been fermenting my organic compost for more than 2 years. I ferment everything. If it's organic, we feed it to our reds. And I hope to answer a couple questions too with this video before we start the build. And the first one is, what is the difference between traditional vermiculture, worm farming, and fermenting, right? Right, Mark? Why do you have to come up with a whole new name? People have been feeding compost to their reds for hundreds of years. You come along and you have to put a new name on it. Why? And I think it's important that we understand that it is a worm farm. We're talking worm farming here, residential worm farming. And why do you have to have a new name? Because it's all about the process. You know, as I've said in other videos, red wigglers are like small babies. They have little mouths and no teeth. So you have to treat them accordingly. And fermenting is about power composting. We break our organic matter down to the smallest possible pieces, because the more surface area exposed on our organic matter, as I've said, the faster it breaks down and the easier these worms can eat it. So fermenting is about that process. It's about composting rolls, rolling your minced compost into a carbon. Okay, when we're talking about worm farming, everybody worries about the green and browns, wet and dry, right? The carbon-nitrogen ratio. With fermenting, that ratio you don't necessarily have to worry about anymore, as long as you follow a few simple steps. And those steps are basically mincing your compost up to the smallest possible pieces using power composting, and then taking that moisture and draining it so it's just your minced compost, and the slurry part of it is a whole nother aspect. We don't waste anything here with the Eve growing system. Even that slurry becomes something important we'll be talking about later on. But the minced compost that's somewhat damp and not too damp gets rolled up into a carbon, into a newspaper or paper bag. I usually use newspaper. So we're doing recycling, we're doing reusing here, and we're taking personal care of our organic output. You know, most people who have garbage disposals put their food in there and it ends up going into the sewer drains, goes out to the sewer, and it has to be treated by the treatment plant, and they add all these chemicals and stuff like this, and then it comes back to us in the form of drinking water. So ultimately, we're drinking all the stuff that we call waste after they treat it with all these chemicals. We should be taking full control on our organics, whether it's personal organics or regular household compost organics. We should be taking full control of it, and we can, thanks to the art of fermenting. You know, with fermenting compared to traditional growing, we don't worry about what we should feed our reds. What would this be good? Would that be good? It's all about presentation. If you mince it up to the smallest possible pieces, they will eat it all. Chicken bones, dairy products, cheese, all kinds of different stuff that you think a red won't eat, they will eat through this fermenting process. Every time is guaranteed. There's nothing that's off limit. There's one thing that I haven't fed my reds yet, haven't tried it, don't know if it'll work, is chocolate. I don't know, I've been denying that. Of course, we never have any chocolate left over in this house, but that's just something I kind of wonder in my head if that's good. So, that's the difference between fermenting and traditional vermiculture. It's presentation. With fermenting, you can ferment in your apartments and condos without having to worry about any unwanted vermin, because with fermenting, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. It's a sealed container. The only thing that gets in is aeration. These worms need air. So it's not about fermenting something, but the process is similar to fermenting, because like fermenting, you have to set it aside, right? Fermenting uses no air. You have to put it to a side for a certain time and it's complete. With fermenting, same thing. You put it to the side and you wait. I say 8 weeks is the perfect time for most stuff that you ferment. Sometimes I have big composting rolls that don't quite get eaten up after I mince it up, but that's okay, because the stuff that's not eaten by these reds goes into the next thing you're getting ready to ferment. Nothing gets wasted. Eventually, they will turn it all into awesome soil amendments in the form of worm castings. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. We're turning all of our organics, whether it's personal organic output or our organics The beauty is, with the fermenting system, they'll eat anything and everything. And we're going to be talking more about the different stuff I have been fermenting. Even with these professional worm farmers, they're kind of turned off by the stuff I ferment. And I can understand why. It's all basically new. Fermenting tower is like a organic household appliance, silently breaking down your organic matter. Okay, you don't hear it. It's just there, and you don't smell it. You don't hear it. You don't see anything around it because nothing knows it's there. And 8 weeks, you just dump it out, and there you have all your organic matter has turned into worm casting. When it's all done, you put it into your eave towers, and it's a great soil amendment. These worm castings, of course, most of us organic growers know, competes with these commercially made synthetic fertilizers. That's another thing that I want to talk about. Oh, can you ferment on a commercial level was another question. I've never done it. I've had my fermenting expands and contracts depending on how I manipulate my worms. So I can go from 20 buckets to 15 buckets, and it keeps going back and forth like that. Can it be done on a commercial level? I've never done it. Nobody's ever done it yet, as far as I know. And I think a great way to do it would be if you lived in an apartment complex, right? And you collected all your fellow dwellers in that unit, in that apartment complex, if you collected their organic matter, and in the basement you turned all of that compost into worm castings, because of course with fermenting we go vertical. Our worm farms are vertical. Each fermenting bin containing probably 2,000-3,000 worms at a time, sometimes more, sometimes less. So let's get on with the build. As the video plays out, I'm going to be narrating the different steps here. Right now, I'm using a PVC cutter that you can get at a box store or on Amazon, and I'm cutting the cap head off, and I'm cutting the head off the bottle. The bottle can be recycled or get your 5 cents if it's a returnable, and we only need the cap part of it. So this is a free item for the most part. In fact, this is an item that if you find a 5-cent bottle, you can make money at. You can use a Coke, you can use a Pepsi bottle. Anything that fits into a 1-inch hole. You can also, I'm drilling 4 holes, 4 bottles, 4 holes. You can do 6 or 8 holes, whatever you feel comfortable with. I've fermented with only 2 holes, and it has worked fine. But 4 is what I've been using. It's to stop a massive die out. This is not fun. Those of us who have had this happen, I'm always sad when I hear fellow fermenters when their worms die like that, because you lose the whole bin because of lack of air, and as you can see, it looks pretty sad. So I'm going to be drilling a total of 5 holes in this build. Okay, 1-inch holes, 4 for the upper aeration holes, and 1 for the bottom drain hole. Drain hole gets a 3/4 inch grommet. That's going to be going into this bottom hole. The grommet is about the only thing you're going to have to buy, and the PVC you have to buy very cheap, and we'll be talking more about that as the video plays. But so you clean it best you can. Very simple build, guys. This can be done if all the parts are right there. This can be done in less than 5 minutes. Right now I'm cutting ribbon that I picked up. I don't know where I got it. It's free. Most of the parts I'm using are totally free. This is the very fine mesh that's going to allow air in, but it's not going to allow any gnats or flies to get in and breed in your bin, and it's going to allow aeration to get in. The way this is designed too is that no worms can clog it, because sometimes when you initially pack your bin, there's certain worms that just don't want to stay in there, and they're going to try to get out the best way they can. They can't get out. They're forced to eat what's given to them. So I think this, even for you guys who have traditional worm farming, think about this method for your worm farms, or if you're going to build in a tote or something like that. Think about this aeration hole. Many problems come about by things flying in and laying eggs and stuff getting out. You don't want to have worms all over the place. This is what it looks like when it's complete. This is the inside of the bin, and this is the outside of the bin. And I'm confident I'm not going to have any more massive die-outs, allowing me to do many other things that we'll be talking about in upcoming videos. The 3/4 inch grommet. that I'll be putting in here, and I got the link below. I get them on Amazon. A fellow verminter named Mark, he gets them a lot cheaper. I've never used the ones he talks about, but I'm confident that they'll work as well. This is a 1/2 inch PVC. Now you can use a garden hose as well for this if you're only the only reason why I use a PVC is because the fittings that come along with those, they're all standard. They work well. But you can use a garden hose and save the money on a PVC, which is very cheap. Now I'm going to be working on the bottom drain filter so the worms can't get out of the bin. In my last build, I was having a problem with worms getting out into the bottle. Now that's not good for a system that's supposed to be all about packing it and leaving it. And this is basically what it looked like when they were getting out. So every morning I'd have to go down and kind of save those worms that ended up in the bottle. I didn't not like that because I'm supposed to pack it and leave it and not have to look at it for 4 weeks, 2 months. So I'm putting a nylon sock on a bottle that I cut in half. All stuff, you know, those socks that get lost in the dryer and you only have one, that's what you use. And right now I'm taping it with duct tape. You can use a rubber band, you can use a string. That's all I had right there. I prefer a rubber band, like one of those lobster rubber bands. And this fits perfectly onto the 1/2 inch PVC. So that was basically the build. Now I guess I'm going to go through the motions of packing the bin and going through that process. I do have videos that I'll put some links down if you care to see it. And these are basically the compost rolls that I've been talking about. The reason why I love using these composting rolls because after the 8 weeks is done, the 2 months is done, if there's no composting rolls, you know everything in there is all worm castings. And this is basically, and I put these composting rolls in my Eve growing towers as well. And the worms, I add a few worms to each tower as well. And these worms multiply as well. And they'll attack these rolls and they will turn that roll into worm castings. So this is basically it. Now I'll pack my Vernmenting bin. I usually add a layer of newspaper down at the bottom. You know, this helps soak up some of the moisture, and then I'll start packing it with my composting rolls. I'll put 2 of the composting rolls on each side of that filter, so it adds some stability as I'm adding the different layers on there. And I'm going to be also adding the internal aeration tube, and that is simply a 1/4 inch galvanized mesh, wire mesh with a nylon sock over it. And this, notice the drain hole is no longer, in this build, the drain hole is no longer for the aeration. It's just for the drain. All the aeration comes from those 4 holes and going down through to that that internal aeration tube there. So that tube sticks up just a little bit when it's all complete and full. That tube is just above the finished grade, so those worms can travel in that if they want to. They get air throughout the bucket with that tube. I've done it without the tube and it's worked well, but I feel better when I add the tube in there. I think it adds more aeration and it's not taking up that much space anyway, so I add it. So I'll be packing this with layers of compost, like making a lasagna, like I said. Packing it with 25, 30 rolls, 20, 30 rolls, right? And I want to talk about, after it's all packed and you add your worms on top, there is a moment there, let's say 2, possibly 3 week time period where the worms are getting accustomed to their environment, where it kind of looks like, oh my God, this probably will not work. I'm here to tell you it works every time. They will get accustomed to the environment and they will eat from the top to the bottom, defying what we think to be true with traditional worm farming or vermiculture, that worms are top feeders. They will go right to the bottom of this bucket, and at the end of the 8-week cycle, you will have worm castings depending on what you're fermenting.
like a bin like this, I'll have a few that haven't been eaten that will be added to the next fermenting bin. So again, eventually it becomes worm castings. So that's basically it. The minced compost there, notice it's in a netting, a 5-gallon paint straining mesh that I let it drain for probably a day, a couple days, so most of the moisture gets out of that, out of the compost, right? And that slurry, as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, it gets sent to my back compost. I'm fortunate enough to have the room to have a back composting bin where I put that slurry, add it with my carbon, which is just minced leaves, and that is the nitrogen that I use. And I get my composting bin is up to 140 to 160 at any given time. I'll add my reds, I'll cap it, I'll date it, and I won't open it up until 8 weeks later. Vernmenting easily competes with these store-bought worm farms on many levels, and we'll be talking about it in upcoming videos, because all of our material, rather than buying and introducing more plastic into our environment, we're using what's already around us in urban settings. Do not buy buckets. Look for the 90-millimeter ones, and with the number 2 on it, as for the recyclable, that's a food-grade container, and that's basically it.
So I hope this has been educational for you all. If you like the video, please put like, subscribe to my channel, come join our Facebook link. That would be great, and we'll literally grow up together. That's all I have to say for now. God bless. Over and out.